The Hill reports that Republican senators are questioning Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth after CNN reported that he paused U.S. weapons shipments to Ukraine without informing the White House. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that U.S. military deliveries to Ukraine started back up today. Overnight, Russia struck a maternity hospital in Kharkiv, Ukraine, part of its intensified aerial assault on Ukraine. One father of a newborn says that hospital windows shattered after the first blast. As the second hit, he rushed his wife and baby to a shelter for safety. Joining us now is David Scheimer. He served on President Biden's National Security Council as the director for Russia. Thanks so much for being with us, David. So CNN crews on the ground in Kyiv have been witnessing this new Russian tactic, Russian drones attacking from all directions, some bypassing the city, circling back to inflict even more damage, bypass air defenses. How can Ukraine correct for this? How can they address this?
So what Russia is doing is continually evolving its offensive tactics through the use of both missiles and drones to get around, defeat Ukrainian air defenses, and incur damage upon Ukrainian cities. But in so doing, to demonstrate yet again that they, and by they I mean President Putin, does not intend to stop this war, that he will not agree to a ceasefire, that he thinks he can wear down Ukraine's resolve, its air defenses, and also wait out the West and wait out declining U.S. aid. And so the way to affect that calculus is not only to provide Ukraine with the kit and capability it needs to defeat Russia's drone and missile tactics, but also to provide it with sustained support, more aid, more equipment, such that they're able to defend their cities over time.
How much time does the unpausing of U.S. aid buy Ukraine?
So unfortunately, the reversal of the pause only releases aid that was authorized under the Biden administration. And so President Biden approved a $1.25 billion aid package in December of last year. That was never supposed to last beyond the summer. And so we are now at a point where the question is not whether the pause will be lifted, which is a good thing, but rather whether new aid, new equipment will be approved, which is much more necessary, urgent, and timely. And so I hope and believe that this administration should authorize new assistance for Ukraine through the use of drawdown, as well as by allowing European countries to buy from our own stocks.
So you and John Feiner, who was the principal deputy national security advisor under President Biden, wrote an article in Foreign Affairs magazine about Ukraine's drone revolution. You say in part, quote, most countries in the world, including the United States, are now far behind the Ukrainians in this regard. Neither the U.S. military nor any European military can produce mass quantities of such low cost and adaptable capabilities. Now, on Thursday, the Secretary of Defense Hegseth announced that he would rescind what he calls restrictive policies that stall production of drones in the United States. He had this highly produced video on the Pentagon's lawn that was later deleted. Do you think that removing the red tape could help in what you, it sounds like you and Hegseth agree needs to happen when it comes to the U.S. Improving its drone manufacturing?
So there's a massive opportunity in Ukraine's drone industry, which the U.S. helped over the course of 22, 23, and 24 to stand up and fund, which is now the most innovative drone industry in the world. Ukraine's able to produce millions of autonomous systems per year at low cost, adaptively, and innovatively. And we should view our partnership with Ukraine in part as an opportunity to learn from their technology, to use it to strengthen our own national security, and in the process, both benefit Ukraine, but also benefit ourselves.
President Trump recently has struck a different tone when it comes to Vladimir Putin. Listen to him earlier this week.
We get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
I imagine that you thought, yeah, of course. But do you think Trump is ready to take a different tack with him beyond, you know, a curse word at a cabinet meeting? Do you think he's ready to, I mean, obviously they unpaused the aid. Do you think maybe he's willing to actually realize what the threat is from Putin and the fact that Putin doesn't want peace, he wants Ukraine?
I hope he is, and I would say that the best way to get to President Trump's objective of a ceasefire is to adjust Putin's calculus to believe that time is not, in fact, on his side in this war. And there are three ways to do that, all of which, in my view, should be done. The first is to authorize additional weapons flows to Ukraine through the use of drawdown authority, as well as by selling stocks to European allies. The second is to intensify sanctions against Russia's energy sector, which will make it more challenging for Russia and for Putin to sustain his war machine over time. And the third is that the United States should request of the European governments to actually seize the immobilized sovereign assets, $300 billion of immobilized Russian sovereign assets inside of Europe that can be used to finance support for Ukraine for the long term, which would send an unmistakable message to Putin that support for Ukraine will not dry up and that he should negotiate in a meaningful way, which to this point he has been unwilling to do.
David Scheimer, thank you so much. Once again, we extend an invitation to the White House and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio to come on the show and talk about the strategy here.
We get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless. He's killing too many people. So we're sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine, and I've approved that.
So that surprise announcement came earlier this week. Now, we know a little bit about what he approved. In an interview with NBC News, President Trump said this, quote, "We're sending weapons to NATO, and NATO is paying for those weapons 100%. We're going to be sending Patriots to NATO, and then NATO will distribute that, presumably Patriot missiles." He also said he was disappointed in Russia and teased that he would make a major statement on Monday. Joining our panel is Jill Dougherty, CNN's former Moscow bureau chief and the author of the new book, My Russia, What I Saw Inside the Kremlin. Jill, thanks so much for being here. So let's start with kind of what this means, big picture. You, of course, also have the sanctions situation working its way through Congress. But does this actually seem like a situation where the president has shifted more aggressively in opposition to Vladimir Putin, is actually realizing that it's not working, or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to obviously jump into his head and know exactly what he's thinking about this. But if you judge by what the president has said, he is angry at Putin, or at least he is disappointed, and he's used profanity to make that point. So what he said is that they are going to be, the U.S. will be providing defensive weapons. And now we get the hint in that NBC interview about what he might talk about on Monday. So what did he say? Okay, United States sells weapons or gives weapons in some fashion to NATO, and NATO pays for it. But I think there are a lot of questions. You know, NATO doesn't buy weapons. The countries that are members of NATO buy weapons. And the United States is part of NATO. So does that mean that the United States is going to chip in on this? Do you see where I'm going? I mean, if it's 100% NATO, U.S. is part of NATO, does the U.S. pay? This may be clarified, but I think the imprecision that the president often uses on things like this is confusing. So, but I do think overall, you have the president of the United States increasingly showing that he is frustrated with Putin and that he wants to provide some type of help militarily to Ukraine.
Jill, when Trump says that things are going to be happening toward Russia, which is a very vague statement. I mean, what do you think the Kremlin hears when he says that?
Well, if you judge by the spokesperson for President Putin, they say, you know, they were reacting first to the profanity a few days ago, but essentially what they're saying is there's a lot of stuff out there. And in fact, the foreign minister talked about, you know, fake news, et cetera. So I think they look at what Trump says. Obviously, they analyze it very closely. But as I was saying, Mr. Trump is not a precise legalistic speaker. So the Kremlin has to take that and then look at what concretely the United States is doing. And there are these two things, weapons and then sanctions. Because you also have Lindsey Graham's bill up on Capitol Hill moving forward. It was kind of stuck for a while. And those sanctions could be quite strong against other countries like India, et cetera, who trade with or buy oil from Russia. So we'll have to see, you know, concretely what happens and what is released on Monday.
So Tyler Pager, you and your co-authors obtained Trump at a fundraiser, is it audio of him speaking at a fundraiser about Moscow. I want to play a little bit of that for our audience and ask you about it. Let's watch.
With Putin, I said, if you go in to Ukraine, we're going to bomb the shit out of Moscow. I'm telling you, I have no choice. The public wants it. The public. So he goes like, I don't believe you. He said, no way, and I said, way. And then he goes like, I don't believe you, but the truth is he believed me 10%. And I told you this, he believed me 10%.
So is the president saying there that, is he basically taking credit for Putin not invading Ukraine until he was no longer in office? I mean, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's part of his evidence that Putin would not have invaded Ukraine had he been president. It's unclear the veracity of what he's saying, whether he did actually say that to Putin or is just bragging about it to donors, but it's part of his larger attitude toward foreign policy where he feels that, he can control what other people do and he just needs to, sort of issue these bellicose threats. We've seen him do that in office now, and it's interesting to see how his relationship with Putin particularly has changed over the last several months as he feels like he has not solved this war that he promised to solve within 24 hours on the campaign trail.